Hey there, we're Shannon and Jerry Arner, your hosts of the Arner Adventures podcast.
We're a minimalist couple driven by intentional living and adventure.
Burned out from the 24/7 grind of running our business, we traded the hustle and the bustle for something more meaningful.
We parted ways with most of our belongings and moved to the coast.
Listen along as we chat about life's challenges, share inspiring stories of those who have taken big leaps to live a life outside of the norm,
and help you live with more intention and less physical and mental clutter.
Each episode is a step toward doing and being just a little bit better for ourselves and the world around us.
Life's an adventure after all. Join us for the ride.
It's the Arner Adventures podcast.
Hello, everybody. I'm Shannon.
And I'm Jerry.
We are back for episode 141 of the Arner Adventures podcast.
Rolling right along.
I just can't believe it. And it's September already.
Yeah.
This is our first episode for September.
Yeah, and we're glad for that. After a long, hot summer, we are encouraged by some cooler weather, hopefully. Coming around the corner.
Yep. Yeah. With September, we want to recognize that September is Suicide Prevention Month. It's just like whenever we talk about mental health or some tough subjects, we think that the more you talk about it, the better it is. The less stigma there is, the more awareness, the more advocacy efforts from people. So we are really, really excited and honored to start September with a guest that, frankly, we're going to let the episode speak for itself, but
please know we will be discussing the topic of suicide.
The topic of suicide can be triggering. So if that is something that you feel that might be difficult for you, just stop the podcast now. If not, please continue. It is a conversation that we think is really important to have.
There are resources out there if you or somebody you know are struggling with thoughts of suicide.
You can dial 988 to call or text 988 to get immediate assistance or reach out to a mental health professional. Our guest is Kevin Briggs. You may recognize that name if you listen to just one of our favorite episodes with Kevin Berthia, which was episode 95. As you may remember, Kevin Berthia found himself on the Golden Gate Bridge where he had the plan to take his life that day. And Sergeant Kevin Briggs is the officer who responded to that call and listened to Kevin, as Kevin Berthia says, is attributed to saving his life that day. And so we are just so excited to have Kevin Briggs on the episode. And this is just such an important conversation, as was the one with Kevin Berthia, but this is the other side of that. And we hope that you will stay tuned to the entire episode and listen to it because it was just amazing.
Well, yeah, he's a great speaker and therefore a great conversation for us. And it was so informative and impactful.
Should we just go ahead and get to it?
Let's get to it.
Okay.
Yeah, let's get to it.
Well, it's an honor to have today's guest with us. You heard about our guest when we had Kevin Berthia on the show last year. Kevin Berthia, if you remember, told us the story of how he found himself on the Golden Gate Bridge on what he said was one of the worst days of his life. And the person who came to his aid to listen to understand, which he's going to tell us more about, was Sergeant Kevin Briggs. Sergeant Kevin Briggs is a retired California Highway Patrol officer and is known as the guardian of the Golden Gate. He spent years patrolling the Golden Gate Bridge, where he compassionately convinced hundreds not to take their lives. A trained negotiator and a mental health advocate, his story has been featured in TED Talks, major media outlets, and his book, Guardian of the Golden Gate. Now through his organization, Pivotal Points, Kevin travels the world promoting mental health awareness, sharing his personal journey, and teaching others how to communicate with those in crisis. Kevin, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely my pleasure, Shannon. Great to be here with you.
We're just so excited that the conversation with Kevin Berthia was so impactful. We hear people, and myself included, who listen to it several times. It's just so inspirational, the whole story. And then to have the other person that was such just such a big part of that as well is just an honor. We do like to start the show with painting a picture of where you're coming to us from. So can you tell us where you are today?
Yes, I'm in Sonoma County, kind of the wine country.
Yeah.
In California, about 30, 40 minutes north of San Francisco, north of the Golden Gate Bridge. A beautiful day. I think it's kind of overcast right now, but I love it. That's why I work down at the bridge. I love overcast and 65 degrees.
Oh,
right now. So this is my kind of weather.
then that is your place for sure. We have friends who live in San Francisco, and we visited a few times, and we just love it. It's beautiful. Before we get started into the big story that everybody knows about, but we want to know more about you and some of the experiences that you've had, and it's a big topic about mental health, and we've had first responders on the podcast before. We have first responders in our family, people who work in corrections in our family. So before we get into the Golden Gate specifically, before you started responding to those calls and before you, I guess, really got into your career, had you had any specific training in mental health or like crisis intervention specifically when it pertains to mental health?
I can sum it up for you very easily. No, zero, nothing. It was horrible. I got to tell you. No, I didn't know how to approach, what to say, what not to say. You know, if somebody's over the rail, over this pedestrian rail on the bridge, there's what we call the cord, and it's kind of an I-beam that parallels the bridge. And if somebody's over there and they jump, am I responsible? It was horrible. It was something that happened quite frequently, 4 to 6 times a month, unfortunately. But it was kind of secondary to everything, so it wasn't really talked about much, and that's why I found out a lot of officers did not want to work down on that Golden Gate Bridge.
I don't know how this works, so forgive my ignorance, but when you were sort of assigned or maybe told that was your area, were you automatically like, oh my gosh, like did you have apprehension about that area because of it?
I did not. I wanted to work down there. I grew up in Marin County, which San Francisco connects to Marin County via the Golden Gate Bridge. So my father had a business in San Francisco. So when I worked with him, I had crossed that bridge many, many, many times. No idea what was going on there with regards to suicide and people who were suffering. But I wanted to work down there because I got to meet people from all over the world every day. Most people come down there, you know, they're celebrating life or birthdays or anniversaries or just on vacation to have a great time.
Yeah.
But there is this other element to it, this dark side. So I wanted to work down there, but I didn't know what I was stepping into.
And you don't have to give specific details if you don't want to. I want to make sure I'm very respectful here. I am curious about responding, again, family members who have told us about the first time they respond to a fire. They're always responding to someone's worst day, right? So I'm curious about the first time that you encountered someone in distress on the Golden Gate Bridge. You know, can you walk us through what went through your mind? I sort of want to almost humanize it because I think so many people would say, well, it's my duty to make sure that I do this and I do this. So I'm just curious, as a human, what was going through your mind when you decided, okay, I'm going to stop and I'm going to engage that person? Like, can you walk us through that?
Yeah, it was actually a younger lady over the pedestrian rail standing on there. And we are in charge of the Golden Gate Bridge, the highway patrol. So when I get down there, I see this young lady and there's pedestrians around. So what we do is we get other officers down there and we back away the pedestrians 100, 150 feet or so. Gives you some time to be with that person and chat with them, hopefully. So I just introduced myself. And as I was speaking with her, all these things are going through my mind. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. Should I be backing up? Should I try to grab her through the rails? All these different things. But I think what really I found out was she had been suffering for a very, very long time, as a lot of these folks have been. And she was involved with drugs and alcohol, and that made it very, very difficult. But in speaking with her, I said, you know what? All I got without the training is to just be myself. And I think she could see how scared that I was doing this and scared for her. So we talked for some time, and she did eventually come back over the rail. But I think a lot of it was just the look in my eyes, like, oh my God, please don't do this.
Yeah.
Not because I may get in trouble or anything else, but because I'm fearful for you.
You don't know what anyone's going through, you or that person either. And I've heard you say, that suicide affects so many people. I mean, of course, the person, but the family. But I'm thinking like you. I just can't even imagine that. I almost think too, the fact that you were being so, I'm sure she could see your authenticity and what you were thinking. You were really scared. And I almost think that helped, like her being able to see that, oh, he's scared. This is scary. Like maybe it almost, I mean, I don't know, but I'm just thinking that when you listen and I think the problem with so many people who are in distress, and I mean, speaking personally, I think that the biggest issue is that talking to someone who you think they're not even listening to me. Like they're just waiting to talk or hearing, what I'm saying, but they're really processing. It's almost the same as like, just if someone asks, how can I help? Or I'm just sure that the authenticity from you must have shown through to her. I mean, it must have.
And that's what I would say. I think you nailed it there. I
Yeah.
didn't have a lot of skills. I didn't really know what to do. I was just kind of relying on my wits. And
Yeah.
if I was the one over there, what could somebody say to me to provide reason, hope, and purpose?
Mm-hmm.
Not how could you do this to your family? Not anything like that. So I knew
Yeah.
something to avoid, just kind of on a whim. But I really wanted her to think about things. Yeah, you're going through a tough time. Maybe you've been going through them 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. But by coming back, you'll have this opportunity for things, to get better. And it's not probably not going to get better right from the start.
Yeah.
It hasn't been going well. Well, it's going to take time. But we chatted, and it wasn't all that long a time before she did decide to come back over. But since then, I've learned so much by talking to people who were over that rail and getting involved with a lot of people who do this kind of work who've been very, very kind to me, and then going through some schools. So it's completely changed. My attitude is still there. It's still, to be honest with you, it's frightening to go up to somebody who is suicidal. I'm scared for them.
Mm-hmm.
And you always think, if I do lose someone, what could I have done different? Those kind of things. So
you said that you've gone to hundreds of incidences at the bridge, and I'm wondering, at what point is it just something that you keep picking up, or is it some point do you say, you know what, when I really relate to them and I'm really understanding and comprehending what they're saying, then like when did this concept come to you about the listening?
After several times of doing this and then talking to some other folks, you realize that if I'm sitting here talking a lot, and if I go to coffee with my friends, yeah, I can talk quite a bit. But what am I learning when I'm chatting away all day long? Nothing. You have to allow them to talk. And sometimes they don't want to, and they're silent.
Mm-hmm.
Get them to talk. So maybe I'll use some examples. I've done this, unfortunately, a lot of times, and a lot of people that come up here, they feel like they're a burden to their families or different things like that, to try it. Well, this is what's going on, and try to get them to talk. And then I'm just shutting up, basically. I'll throw some little things out there now and again. But when they're speaking, then they're venting and I'm getting information. That's exactly what I want to happen. So if they're willing to talk, I need to learn to step back and pretty much be quiet.
Mm-hmm. So when you are advocating and I guess helping other people now with training for this, is that sort of what the type of thing that you're getting them to do? Like, do you go now to do you still work with the Highway Patrol in that capacity to start to help train them for that?
No, I do teach, and I go to a lot of different police agencies, and I've been to Secret Service, the FBI. I'm going to, well, actually, Kevin Briggs and I are going to Mesa, Arizona, in a few weeks to do a 3-hour talk with those folks.
Okay.
The police department there. So, we still do a lot of that, which is great. Anytime I can get a chance, as long as folks are interested in it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what this is about, especially police departments. Look how many calls are out there regarding mental health nowadays. We have training on this. So if I can bring some of my experience to, and then also, I talked about the other things and personal things in my life with cancer and heart issues and things. Well, we need to be cognizant of that. So there's a lot to this that we bring to the table.
One of the biggest questions I have for people who work in mental health, who are first responders, who work in any capacity to help others, and I know it happens a lot in the medical field as well. But I just wonder, was there a point in your responses, and you, I'm assuming that you might have, I don't know, I'm just imagining this. I don't know if maybe on down the road people were other officers maybe encountering someone. Did they ring you up and say, hey, can you come because you're so good at this? And so this is a two-part question. I wonder if that happened, but I'm also wondering, over and over, there has to be a level of um I compassion fatigue is sort of what I always have in my head, or there's so much empathy that I'm wondering, how did you handle that yourself in internalizing all of that? Because you became the guardian of the Golden Gate, and I'm wondering, that's a weight, like, no, either way, you know?
It is. I'll address the Guardian of the Golden Gate and bring. I don't particularly like the Guardian of the Golden Gate, even though my book is named that. I didn't
Yeah.
have the shot collar on that one because I think there's so many people or so many guardians of wherever that may be. So if it catches somebody's attention, and maybe if they do want to check out the book and read it and get some tips, phenomenal. But it sounds a little egotistical for me, and that's one of my number one things that I talk about in negotiations. If you bring an ego, you're in these sorts of deals, you're probably not going to be very good. So with me, I did get called out on occasion to cover these if they didn't have the people that they thought maybe good for this type of situation.
Mm-hmm.
But in getting there, if I find that I'm not the one that can do this breakthrough and get to someone, that I need to be able to step back and say, you know what, maybe we need a female officer or a black officer if we have the people power to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really big when I talk about negotiations. Am I the right person for this? And if it's a very small department and they don't have it, then we have to do this, and that's just the way it goes. We deal with what we have.
Mm-hmm.
But we did have quite a few people working, and I can call somebody from somewhere else generally. So I would say, if I'm not making a connection, that's what this is about.
How did you take care of yourself with all that? I mean, you talked about you were going through a lot of things too. So, I mean, I can't imagine having that as well. Like, how did you take care of yourself?
I really didn't. And then just a very brief, colorful past. I had some very, very, very harsh, severe, terrorizing abuse when I was very young, from 8 to 10 years old, by a neighbor. That when I talked to folks, I held that in for 45 years before I sought help for it. It was very brutal. But then I had testicular cancer when I was in the Army, had some head trauma, 3 heart surgeries. So all this stuff that we don't talk about, plus what we see.
Yeah.
It was years before I finally went and got some help. And I thought, you know what? Am I going to get fired? I'm going to be put on medication. Am I going to lose my job? None of this happened. None of this happened.
Mm-hmm.
I get to go out and speak. I've been doing this for 11 years now, going out, and I've been all over the world, little places like Borneo, way out in the jungle, way out back of Australia. I've made friends all over the world.
Yeah.
But, so what I thought and what actually happened was 2 entirely different things. And even though I've been through a lot of stuff, mental health and things, and just, like cancer and all that, I don't talk about that when I'm talking to someone who was suicidal. We have to remember, it is about them. This is not the Kevin Briggs show. It is about that individual. So unless they bring some, you don't know what it's like to have cancer and how that, well, I did. Maybe we can talk about that.
Yeah.
Commonalities can create comfort, but we have to be very careful because we want this conversation to be about them.
Mm-hmm. Kevin, birthday is the time that there's a couple of things that keep going through my head about this. And, so many of us have seen that image of I mean, I think it was a photo of the year for that year or something. I can't remember. I just remember Kevin saying that.
Yes.
Yeah. I remember, of course, him, but I remember you looked like you were really settled in. Like, it was like, I mean, and I don't know, but in my mind, the way I see that image, it's like, oh, him, who I didn't know you at the time. I didn't know it was you at the time, but I remember thinking, oh, that officer is really, he's there for the long haul. Like, that's what it looked like to me. I was like, oh, he's really having a conversation with this guy. Like, it just seemed like you were, okay, I'm here. Like, it's you and I. And I know I'm talking about the weight of it. And I'm just thinking the weight of every single conversation like that and the toll that it must have taken on you as well. But what was is there an average like time frame that conversation is, or does it just vary so much?
The time really does vary. I've had them as short as maybe 15 minutes. The longest one I had was 8 hours. So most of them are probably within an hour.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Towards the end of your career, before you retired, that career, I should say, that career,
Yeah.
before you retired, did you see it get better? Maybe there were more processes in place of processing after? Were there more training before you retired?
There was some training. I went through, we call it CIT, Crisis Intervention Team training. And then what I wish would have happened way in my early part of my career, but I had the opportunity to go through the FBI Crisis Negotiator School. And that was wonderful. That
Mm-hmm.
really taught me a lot, and a lot of neat folks involved with that I've still kept up with today. So things like this, if you're going to come out and do this work, you have to go through a school first. Please, maybe you're tagging along with a veteran officer, but yeah, I think that was a big disservice, is not getting trained in this before I went out and did this type of work. It'd be like
Mm-hmm.
anything else,
Mm-hmm.
coming up and what any job that you want to do, you
Yeah.
have to get some training in it, and
Yeah.
especially when your life is on the line. Don't throw people out there. So it has gotten better. I personally would like to see more based on what I've seen and what I do now and in my travels, but
Mm-hmm.
it is getting better.
Yeah.
So is the other side of that. If we lose people, what about that officer? And
Yeah.
so we have the employee assistance program, and as long as we get someone who is trained in trauma and what these officers are going through, that's what I ask. That could be a real asset to the department.
Mm-hmm. Did that training, I know you were a negotiator too, so did that training, then was it sort of the similar training when you were a negotiator? And, when I think, and I'm sure listeners are thinking negotiator, they're thinking these like TV hostage negotiators or talking someone, into not setting a bomb off, all this stuff. So did is that what you were doing as well? Were you doing both of these types of things?
No, I
Okay.
specialized almost 100% just on the bridge suicides. So
Okay.
I went to some other ones, but usually they were within a city. So let's say I went to a bank robbery that was very close to our office, but it happened to be in a city. Well, the
Okay.
city police department handled it. They would call in the FBI and they would do that. So, and mine was not, it was negotiations, but it was very, very specialized and unique to these high end places, the
Mhm.
Golden Gate Bridge, where you're 220 feet above it. So, um, virtually everything I did was there. So,
Mm.
yes, I was trained as a negotiator, but it was quite different than what you would do for a bank robbery or, something along those
Yeah.
lines, a terrorist or something.
Yeah. I remember Kevin talking about this a little bit, but I don't remember what the end result was. Is have there now been things put into place? Like, it seems like there was talk about a barrier going up or something like that. Is there anything like that on the bridge itself now?
There is a suicide barrier. It's kind of a net, a marine mesh material that is
Mhm.
on both sides of the bridge over the rails, and it's about 20 feet down and about 20 feet out. So since that has been put into place and fully completed, the amount of suicides has dropped dramatically.
Oh, good.
Yes. And I may be off it a little bit, but the last time I checked, about a month ago, I believe to date this year, there's only been 4, which is a huge drop. We would get maybe 30 a year,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
maybe a couple hundred people taken off for a mental health evaluation. That's still up there a ways. But as far as the completed suicide numbers, they're down dramatically.
I heard this in your TED Talk, and it was I think the first time I'd ever heard it, in not being from that area either, so I don't know if it was just that, but you talked about how people glorify the bridge, that it's sort of I'm gonna completely mess up the words, but it was like some people look at it as like a portal in between one world and another, and that if you do this, it'll cleanse your soul. Where does all that come from? Like, did it come from someone, or did it come from a story, or why is it sort of glamorized in that way?
I think maybe it came from some of the newspapers, maybe in readings that people did, or their own thoughts. And it was also, when you look at things, relatively easy. If you
Mm,
wanted to do it with a gun, you have to go buy a gun. If you don't have one, you have to do the background checks. You have to wait. When we
yeah.
know, for instance, there's a neat study, I believe, out of Houston that says somebody may be thinking about suicide for quite some time. But when they say, you know what, I've had it, this is it, 48% will attempt within 20 minutes.
Mm,
Half the people. So this is what we're taking away, that crisis right now.
yeah.
That's what we're doing by putting the nets up there. So
Yeah.
we give them time to think about.
We were in New York recently, New York City, and I don't know if you know about the Vessel. Do you know about the Vessel? It's almost like an art. It's like a building art. People walk it, and I don't know how many floors it is up. It's near the High Line, down near the Hudson River, and it's really beautiful. And people go and they're like, "Oh, I want to walk the Vessel and climb up it." And this last time I went with my husband, and he had never been there. And I was like, "Oh, yeah, we need to go to the Vessel. You're just going to love it." And so we get there and it's closed and they're doing some construction. And I was like, "Well, I wonder what they're doing." And anyway, long story short, I read where the increase of suicides had happened from the Vessel. And I remember reading where all these advocates were trying, and some of them were officers who had responded to these, incidences. And they were saying, we've got to put up barriers. We have to put up barriers. And, people who didn't want to do it were like, well, if someone's going to make that decision, they're going to do it anyway. But the people who were advocating for them to be a barrier said, but if they're up there and they're making that decision, they won't do it then. And so maybe it can delay them getting some help. And so now there's signs all over it that they're putting up that says how to get help if you're thinking about this. And so I guess my question here is, do you run into instances where people, want you to advocate for things like that? Or were you a part of maybe them getting the barrier at the Golden Gate?
Here's the crappy part. I didn't want it. I thought, yeah, but it's a little story to it. Because I worked on the bridge and I see, the hundreds of thousands of people that come there and want to look right over this rail. And you could look down. I saw, of course, let's see, not the Queen Mary, but one of the QE ships go through, and it's an
Uh-huh.
ocean liner. It's different than a regular cruise ship. It's very
Yeah.
sleek, very slim. It was
Yeah.
awesome. You see porpoises and seals, and you're looking straight down at the water. I didn't want that inhibited by anything. I had a gentleman come up to me who lost his daughter on the bridge, and I had handled his case. And this was after I was retired. And he asked me, I said, well, I'm not a big advocate of it because this. And I kind of stepped back. I thought he was just going to drill me, rightfully so. He lost his
Yeah.
kid on the bridge.
Yeah.
But he took a breath and he said, Kevin, I want you to look at it like this for a second. He goes, and he raised his hands like two cups. And he goes, you have a view, on one side and a life on the other. And I felt like an ass, to be honest with
Mm.
you. He changed my mind right there, even though I had lost people, a number of people from that bridge, and helped a number of people. I don't use the word saved, but when he said that, he turned me that quick. So,
Hmm.
and now that it's up and I really see what it is, it's not inhibiting anything. Your view's just fine. It's all great. So it
Well,
took
that's good.
that gentleman to really see, you know what, man, quit thinking about yourself and think about others, which I thought I was,
Yeah.
but I was a little skewed. So I'm glad it's up there. It's doing its job.
Uh-huh. So you do support things like that, like at like even at the Vessel and other ones, I'm imagining.
The only thing I can think of right now is that the cost, is extreme, especially in California, where
Mm.
a gun
Mhm.
is $30. The only thing I could say is, what could we have done in the Bay Area with those funds for suicide prevention?
Oh.
That's my
Yeah.
only thing that I could say about it.
Yeah.
I'm not even saying we should have done it. I'm saying what could be done. So those types of questions should be addressed.
Tell me about how did these experiences and all of the things that all the people that you encountered, all these instances, is that what did you know you were going to start Pivotal Points? And then can you tell us about that?
I had no idea. People would come up and they'd want to do interviews when I was still on the job. And I tried to pass them up to the officers because I promoted a sergeant. So basically, I was I pretty decently paid administrative assistant, even though I was a field sergeant and the motor sergeant because I rode the bike. I didn't get out of the office maybe 3% of the time. You know?
Right.
Yeah, I just pushed paper all day long. I go, oh. But I would go down when things were happening at the bridge to see if the officers needed help. I never butted in. Hey, let me handle. No, no, no. This is an officer's job. But I would assist wherever needed. So when I was asked to do an interview with Yahoo News, and I tried to give it to the officer, said, "No, we want you to do it." And I said, "That's fine." I thought it'd be a half hour. Come to the office, we'd talk for a bit, and that'd be the end of that. I forget. It was either 6 hours or something I spent with them, putting GoPros on my motorcycle, down going on the bridge, riding the bike back and forth. So this came out before, of course, before I retired. And I usually took the whole month of December off. I like Christmas time and time in the Highway Patrol. So when I came back, I had all these calls and all these letters from people because this Yahoo News segment for 6 minutes had come out. So that's when I had some mentors, and they. Oh, also there was a call from TED, the TED Talk folks, and you know, I'm not going to say, oh, I'll lie to you. No, I'm going to be very, very honest with you here. Wasn't quite sure what a TED Talk was. I had heard of them, but
Really?
I was in my own little world in the Highway Patrol. So
yeah, I guess so. You're right. Yeah.
It's kind of a humorous story. Then I called up a couple of mentors and they said, "What the hell are you doing? Call them back right now." And they hung up on me. So I said, "Okay, I'll do this TED Talk." I haven't done a talk before. That was kind of my first one.
What?
I didn't know what really to do.
Okay, wait. Let's pause. You might know by now, like people practice for these things for at least a year.
I know now.
And so now knowing that was your first one, it was so smooth. It was just, I wouldn't tell you that. I just wouldn't say anything. It was really good. So to now know it was your first one.
Well, and then, you know, you got to do practices. And I wasn't used to this Zoom type stuff and these types of things that we're doing here and all this. I didn't know how to do this. So I had to find out how to do this. And I'm practicing this with the board. There's Chris Anderson, the guy in charge of the whole thing, and all these folks. And we're doing this like we are here. And then they get done. And they said, "You know what? We'd like to give you another," I forget what he said, a minute or something. I said, "All right, whatever you want, let me know." Well, I didn't realize how big a deal this is. If they're giving me a minute, they're taking a minute from somebody else because they only do 5 a day. At a TED, there's only the one TED a year. You can do TEDx's and things.
Yeah.
I said, "Sure." I didn't really even think about it until way later. They gave you a minute. You know, they have to take somebody's minute away. And these are career changing environments for people. I don't know what I was doing. I'm just talking about this stuff that occurred. So that's what sparked a whole lot of things for me. Very, very humbled and fortunate to be able to get there and to show folks, hey, man, you know, this is happening all over the world. You know, in Japan and China on the bridges, and at the Gap in Australia, things are getting better there. But this is going on all over. We're losing 49,000 people a year just in the United States.
Yeah.
Start talking about this more.
It's interesting because I'm imagining you probably had in your head, I'm going to retire and rest and chill out and but it's so important, and I love that it's called pivotal points. Like, did you come up with that name?
I did, and there's many pivotal points for people throughout, whether it's a career change. It's not just something a pivotal point for your life, you know, for your very existence. It's well, should I get married? What should we have kids? You know, there's pivotal. Should I go back to school? There's pivotal points for everything. When I did this TED Talk and all these things started coming my way, people told me I wanted to wait. I was 50 years old. I wanted to wait till 54, 55, 56 to retire from the Highway Patrol. If I waited those, 4 or 5, 6 years, you'd be forgotten. You have to strike when the iron's hot, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I'm maybe shoveling snow or working in a coffee shop or something, And I go to coffee shops almost every day. I love coffee shops. Big fan. But I said, I'm going to give this a try. And I've been in government service all my life. The military, corrections, highway patrol, I had no clue what I was doing, how to step into it. I didn't know how to do these. I didn't work on a computer. I barely even knew how to make a Word document. So
wow.
it was quite a change.
I bet it is. I bet it is.
It was by hand. So
I'm sitting here thinking, just like, I want to, I guess, on a serious note, and I asked Kevin Berthia this too. Are you able to, I guess, accept sort of the beauty of the Golden Gate, the bridge, the bay, or do you have sort of feelings about it that you want to stay away from it?
no, I pass it. I'll only generally walk on it for interviews or something. Because I work down there, most days, so I've seen it a lot of times. But it's
Yeah.
always changing. You're always going to see something different. It's like if you any beat cop, if they work the beat, well, this happened here, this happened here. So as I'm
It's
going
true.
down the bridge, these stories, they're both good and bad. I
Yeah.
won't ever not cross it because it's hurting me too much or anything. No,
Yeah.
most of the time, if we get to talk to someone, if they're over the rail, they do come back. Now,
Right.
if you're going to be in this work and you want to do that type of thing, you have a good chance of losing folks, and that just goes along with this kind of work.
Yeah.
But we have to think, when I'm talking to officers, I talk about this. How many people have you helped? And then I really talk a little bit about ego and not having an ego to do this, but I want you to think, how many people have you helped? Got to put
Mm-hmm.
a little bit of ego into this, because if you're not doing this type of work, who is? If you're trained for this and you want to do a good job and you want to be there,
Yeah.
if you're not there because you're not mentally healthy, who is going to do this type of work? So you have to take care of yourself.
You talked about ego, and it made me think about, and you have said this, and I loved that you said this, because let's see, I want to tread lightly here. I think a lot of people have a perception that officers have an ego, right? And I think that they think, oh yeah, I saved this many people. I loved that you said, and it might have been your TED Talk or it might have been somewhere else, that you said, I lost two, but it was too many. And I just think that when you said it and I heard it, I thought, that is so wonderful, because if you are those two people's families, you don't want to hear you say, yeah, I've saved this many, I've saved this many, because they're thinking about that one, that they lost their son or they lost their child. And I know that you have spoken with those families, and I just think it's so great that you really enforce that about the ego, because it's so important. I think that you say it that way, and I'm sure you feel it that way, that it was too many.
Yeah, if you're getting it into this type of thing to be a hero or be on TV or something, you're not doing this right. No,
Yeah.
it is about them. Of course,
Yeah.
we come into it afterwards. I was going to say, for our own self. Okay, what happened? Do we need to talk to someone? Like I said, I'm a big believer in the EAP process, Employee Assistance Program, for those departments who do go into this. But just make sure that whatever has happened to you that you want to see somebody about, that they are trained in that. And I say that because I had a boy, one of my two boys, I have two boys. One of them was suicidal, and I sat in when he was getting spoken with by a mental health professional, and it was horrible, absolutely horrible experience. This guy did about everything wrong that when I teach how to do a suicide assessment, he did about everything wrong. Everything. It was a horrible experience. So please, if you're going to see somebody because you're having suicidal thoughts, make sure they are trained in suicide assessment. I would even go further. How many hours you got? What is your theories about it? I'll dig deep now because I know this is kind of it's
Absolutely.
it kind of sucks, but this is kind of my life right now, is doing this.
Yeah.
I believe in getting the training for it because it's so devastating to lose folks.
The mental health stigma, and the reason that we talk about it on the show a lot, is because, I think for so many years, people just didn't talk about mental health at all. And I think that, just like with anything, that the more you talk about anything, the more stigma is reduced. So yes, we've come a long way. I don't want to be negative. I know that, because you're doing the work, that there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. But what advice would you give someone who has a family member that they're worried about, are they having these thoughts, or maybe they've expressed it? What would you encourage someone who is trying to be supportive of someone who is struggling, what advice would you have for them?
I would say if you're going to talk to them about it, be open about it. Do this somewhere where they are comfortable, not in a public place. Remember everything about them. If they're really thinking about suicide and they may talk about it, don't do this at a coffee shop in front of other people. What if it was you and they
Yeah.
might break down? This is one of the toughest conversations we can have.
Yeah.
Don't try to fix anything. That will come later on, may not be from us, may not be from a mental health professional. If you really think somebody is suicidal and this, don't be afraid to call 911. There's a lot of officers trained in how to respond to these types of things now. And they can
Yeah.
do it with compassion and care and not just covering you up and throwing the back of the car.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to have this conversation. Have you been thinking about suicide? Let's say you're going through a divorce. Somebody has a mental illness, or maybe or another type of illness, a cancer, diagnosis of cancer, and all these different things. You know what? Anybody going through all this stuff might be thinking about suicide. Has that crossed your mind? Because they think they're the only one going through this. Nobody else has. But you know what? You gave them an out. You know what? Anybody going through this might be thinking about this. Have you been thinking about it? And then be prepared if they say yes. No, none of us want to hear that. That's oh my God, now what? Now we freak out. But if you do hear that, take a breath. How long have you been thinking about this? Do you have any plans on doing it? Well, if you did, have you tried something before and what stopped you? And we can go on for a very long talk about the hooks. Well, I couldn't do this to my kids. Great. Now we can talk about that and the kids. Reason, purpose, and hope. Try to provide. Get some help. And a lot of parents, like with me, with my boy, when he was going through it, a lot of kids, they don't want to talk to their parents. Well, see who else they can talk to. But let them know, hey, I'm here for you, not to judge you, but to be here for you.
I'll tell you, like I told Kevin Berthia, I know that this is, and it's two different parts, but I hope you can see it too, that all of these things that you've been through and all of this training and then what he has been through and all these speaking engagements he does and advocacy, I hope that you know how much of an impact you've made, not just on those, not which are huge, the people on the bridge, but I hope like people like me or anyone listening to this or any of the people who have seen any of the TED Talks, the speaking engagements, all of it. I hope that you can grasp that it was all worth it. It was all meant. This is the path, the pivotal point where you really have made huge impacts. I hope that you know that.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for saying that.
Yeah, well, it's true. Okay, so we're gonna do your fast 5 questions, a little lighter here.
These are tough ones. I go, oh, and then I always think about. I'll be thinking about it tonight. Why did I say that? I go, oh my God! Can we go back and do it again?
I have people ask me that all the time. Can I have a do-over? Now, these are this or that. It's no pressure, but it's sort of geared to you, and it's a way to get to know you a little bit better. So, number 1, writing a book or giving a TED Talk?
Giving a TED Talk.
That's still amazing to me. You're just like, it's whatever. Number 2, cable cars or biking the city?
Cable cars. Bicycles, no, they get hit all the time. Don't ride a bicycle in the city.
Number 3, Ghirardelli or Godiva?
Ghirardelli.
Of course. I would have been like, what? If you didn't say that. Number 4, taking a ferry to Sausalito or sailing on the bay?
Ferry to Sausalito.
Okay.
I hung out in Sausalito a lot, so.
Okay. And then number 5, a Giants game or a concert at the Fillmore?
What was the concert at the Fillmore?
Follow up. Who would be your you wave a magic wand? Who would you like to see?
The only thing that would really come into that I can think of right now would be something like Journey, something along those lines.
Okay. No, that would be good. The original lead singer, of course. Yeah. Yeah. And then the question that we do ask everyone, and we would love it if you could answer it, is what does a life well lived mean to you?
I heard a guy say this the other day, and I'm kind of going off of what he said. You're on your deathbed. Only because my father died back in December, and I was with him when he passed away.
Oh, sorry.
I'm on my deathbed. I'm got up in age, hopefully. And you know what? I'm hoping I would say I want to be around the people that I love, that love me, and not this Rolex watch, not the accomplishments, not these other things. Yeah, hopefully I help some people, but you're surrounded by people that you love, and you're not thinking about, for instance, a college degree or things that material things that you have obtained. So a life well lived is about the friendships and the love that's been created around you.
That's beautiful. Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. Well, I would love it if you could tell our audience how they can find you, get in touch with Pivotal Points, and also how can we serve you? How can we help you? What can we do to help your advocacy?
Just take a look at yourself. How are you doing? Don't be afraid to put yourself on top, your own self-care. Guys, have a support group. I didn't until I retired. And now I go out to coffee, and with this mental illness and anxiety and things, sometimes it's hard for me to get out of the house. They'll call me or text me when I'm home and not traveling. Say, Kev, you're coming down for coffee, right? So it kind of pushes me to get out of the house. And when I do, man, it's fantastic. That, and don't be afraid and put it off to get professional care, whatever kind of profession that is. A sensei, and I did a keto for a while because my boys are half Japanese. So get that professional care, not just a psychologist, psychiatrist, something along those lines, but a good mentor who can help you. So we have our support system, our professional care leading up to us. And this triangle, we are on the top. Even though most of us, we give, for in our time and our ways and our love, put yourself on top up there too at times and think about, how am I doing? People can get a hold of me at my website, www.pivotal-points.com, or Kevin Briggs at pivotal-points.com.
And we'll make sure we link all of that down in the show notes. And thank you so much for this. This was wonderful. We really appreciate it.
It's actually my pleasure. This has been great. Thank you for having me.
Well, once again, we always seem to top ourselves, and I feel that way again. And what I want to say pleasant conversation, in a sense that he's a pleasant person.
Yeah.
Although it's tough subject matter, but man, it really gives you something to you'll walk away with something there to think about for a while, and it's very useful stuff.
Yeah. So, Jerry wasn't here for this conversation, but as we always say, when Jerry's not here, he always listens to it back through, and while I'm editing and all that. And I just finished, and so we always like to do our takeaways. And when I finished, you were just like, wow, that was just really impactful. There's no other word for it, I guess, other than impactful and inspirational, because we always say, there's so many people who don't, quote unquote, get it when it comes to, I don't know, grief that maybe, and I'm not saying ours is any more important, any different, anything, the things that we go through, everybody is going through something.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think to hear his take on it, that when you're dealing with something like this, with someone who is having those thoughts of taking their own life, that you have to listen. And even if you don't get it, which, like he said in his TED Talk, you probably don't understand, but listen with the intention of trying to understand is so important. And I just love his approach to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. He's found something as you want to say a late life calling after his career.
Yeah, and it's like I said, the podcast, when he ended his career, I go, well, your first career.
Yeah.
Because the second one is this. And it's so, and like I said, I don't remember if I said this on air or off air, that what he does, the whole trajectory of how all of this worked out happened for a reason.
Yeah.
He probably, I didn't even ask him this, I don't think he got into the career he's in to save people off the Golden Gate Bridge. I mean, I don't think he that was the plan. But wow. And I know he doesn't like the term guardian of the Golden Gate, because he always doesn't, he doesn't want to lead with ego, and he didn't coin that himself, but he ended up being that for so many people. And now his advocacy continues to be the guardian of the Golden Gate and beyond, because what he does is saving so many lives.
Well, and the key with that too was that he is a good listener, and he uses that as the main thing he's been able to do. And Kevin Berthia, of course, stated that he's our guest from episode 95. That what talked him off the bridge after an hour and a half or something like that.
Yeah,
was that he just listened. And maybe that's something that's just lacking a lot in a culture such as ours, filled with a lot of distractions and fast-paced movement, and people don't stop to listen. And that's what he does, and what has made him so special in what he does.
I wanted to also end this and make sure that I get this across, because when we were off air, we were chatting, and I was just thanking him again for everything that he does. And he and Kevin just have really, I think, changed my life for sure. Yeah. And I was telling him like situations I've been in, and then most recently dealing with just the weight of the grief that we've experienced. And when I told him, this so much judgment goes into what you're going through, and why are you so sad about that loss of a pet? And I wish this would have been on the air, but it wasn't. He got up from his chair and he went and got 2 of his fur babies, rescue fur babies, these senior babies, and explained that, he had rescued them, and that before, I believe it was 3 years ago, he lost his dog, and he said it was the worst thing I've ever experienced as far as pain. And he'd lost his father, and, he had a great relationship with his father, and it was very sad, but he said losing his dog was one of the most painful things he had been through. And it just, even another, I'm saying pivotal moment, because this nonprofit's pivotal points, no pun intended, but it was another pivotal moment that showed me, gosh, he just really gets it.
Right.
And it just, again, made that conversation so much warmer to me. And just, it just means so much. I don't think I can explain how timely this conversation was. I have even taken a break from doing some guests on the podcast. And I'm just glad that this one just resonated so much. And I hope that to anyone listening, it resonates with you as well.
And I'm sure it will. And it's neat that you could make that connection. It just gives the whole conversation extra impact, for you and me too. Hearing about hearing your conversation with him on the pet loss, and things like that can be skirted over so easily sometimes, but you just never know. And what
someone's going through,
or what affects someone personally that may not affect somebody else so personally, or whatever. So you never know, as we say. Yeah. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, if you think that this is beneficial to someone, please do share this episode with them. And as well as episode 95. The two, I think, together are just great. And we'll share the links down in the show notes for the Kevin Berthia episode.
If this episode resonated with you, or if you know of someone who would benefit from what we talked about, please share it with a friend.
It's a great way of supporting the podcast, and we really appreciate it.
Another way of supporting the pod is by leaving us a 5-star review or rating on the platform you are listening to us on.
And go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That also supports us. You can always find us, the show notes, and sponsors who support the podcast at arneradventures.com.
And until next time, enjoy the journey you're on. We're wishing you lots of adventures.
Bye-bye.